This is the story of a woman who walked away from the most watched moment in British television history and never looked back. Anita Dobson played Angie Watts in EastEnders from the very first episode in February 1985, and on Christmas Day 1986, 30.15 million people watched Den Hand Angie Divorce Papers, a record no British soap has beaten since. And then, just 2 years later, she chose to leave. Her departure was considered so significant that it made the BBC 6 o'clock news, which tells you everything about the scale of what she was walking away from. The character she had built over 3 years was not just popular, it had become the kind of cultural touchstone that entire generations of British viewers refer to when they talk about television that actually meant something, and walking away from that, voluntarily, at the height of it, is the thing this video is about. To understand why that decision meant what it did, you have to start at the beginning. And the beginning was Stepney, in the East End of London, on the 29th of April, 1949. Her father worked as a dress cutter, her mother made most of the family's clothes at home, and at 16, Dobson left school with 4 O-levels and cycled through a string of jobs, insurance clerk, model for C&A, before deciding that what she really wanted was to be an actress. Training at the Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art placed her among alumni who went on to serious careers: Angela Lansbury, Hugh Bonneville, Minnie Driver, Terence Stamp, Julian Fellows. But drama school is one thing, and a sustained career is quite another. The training gave her the foundation, but what followed was 13 years of doing the actual work, touring the country in repertory companies, including a stint at the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow, doing pantomimes and the occasional West End show, and bits of television whenever they came along. By her own description, she was a jobbing actress living in Stepney, and at one point she was on the dole. That is not a comfortable position to be in when you have spent years training and then years more grafting your way around the country, but it is also the position that tens of thousands of working actors in Britain understand from the inside, and it shapes the way you think about your career when something finally does break through. That is the woman who walked into the EastEnders audition in early 1985. Not a polished star waiting for the right vehicle, but someone who had spent more than a decade doing the work quietly and without any guarantee that it would ever come to anything. Here is something most people do not know about how Angie Watts came to exist as Anita Dobson played her. The role almost went to someone else entirely, and the switch happened with 4 days to spare. Director Matthew Robinson recommended an actress called Jean Fennell for the part, and she had qualities that creators Tony Holland and Julia Smith found genuinely compelling. Born in the East End herself, and bringing what they described as a unique combination of vitality, vulnerability, and an almost desperate nervous energy, Fennell was cast, rehearsals got underway, and then Smith made the decision that she was wrong for the part, with only 4 days remaining before the first studio recording. What happened next came down entirely to a memory. Julia Smith had taught Anita Dobson years earlier and carried a specific impression of her: sharp, brittle, very theatrical, with a vitality that was almost intense and a range of emotions that Smith later described as alarming considering her youth. The one reservation was age, with Smith wondering whether Dobson might be too young for the role. Dobson came in for the audition, and it turned out she was exactly the right age. The reading went well, and 4 days before filming on EastEnders began, Anita Dobson was cast as Angie Watts. The entire trajectory of British soap history turned on a last-minute decision, a producer's memory of a young actress she had once taught, and a concern about age that dissolved the moment Dobson walked into the room. From the night EastEnders launched on the 19th of February 1985, Angie Watts was central to everything that made the show work. As the landlady of the Queen Vic, she was emotionally battered, struggling with alcoholism, and locked into a volatile marriage with Den Watts that audiences found completely compelling from the start, and the sustained tension between Den and Angie pushed EastEnders past Coronation Street and to the top of the ratings. But the moment that defined the whole era, and the moment that still defines Anita Dobson's place in television history, came on Christmas Day, 1986, and the road to it ran through one of the most dramatically loaded storylines the show had ever attempted. Desperate to hold on to her husband, Angie told Den she was terminally ill and had only 6 months to live, and Den, racked with guilt, held back from what he had been planning. What Angie did not know was that Den had overheard a conversation that exposed the lie, and on Christmas Day, while she believed her marriage was finally safe and that things were turning her way at last, he told her he knew the truth and handed her divorce papers as a Christmas present. 30.15 million people watched that happen, making it the highest-rated episode in British soap history, a record that has never been surpassed. And to give that number some real context, the EastEnders Christmas Day episode in 2023 drew 3.8 million viewers. The distance between those two figures is a measure of what the show was during the Dobson years and what it has since become. That same year, 1986, EastEnders attempted something else that had never been done in British soap, a 30-minute episode featuring only 2 people, and Holland and Smith genuinely feared it would not hold up with audiences. It held up, and the press and the viewing public both agreed it worked, which established a format the program has returned to ever since. There was also a storyline during this period that Dobson had actively opposed from the beginning, fighting to get the scripts changed, and she was eventually persuaded to play the scenes. The performance earned widespread praise, described at the time as brilliant, but the public reaction to the episode was enormous and divided, and the outcry over the final 2 shots was serious enough that Julia Smith had to cut one of them for the omnibus edition. What that period illustrates is not just how popular the show was, but how much weight Dobson was carrying within it. She was not decorating the set. She was at the center of the most discussed, most watched, most controversial material the show produced, and she was doing it week after week, while her private life was simultaneously becoming unmanageable. By 1986 and into 1987, the level of recognition had become something closer to an intrusion than a reward, and Dobson has spoken about what that period actually felt like across many years of interviews. In the days of EastEnders, in her own words, she could not go into a pub or supermarket because people would recognize her and follow her home. She has elaborated on this elsewhere, describing people following her home in cars and singing outside the window of her flat, a daily reality in which going to a supermarket or walking down the street had become genuinely impossible. She described that life as bizarre, but also as simply the life she was living. Coming from where she had come from, 13 years of rep theater and pantomime and periods on the dole, the fame itself was not something she had been building towards or preparing for, and the scale of it arrived with a speed that left very little room to adjust. And it was right in the middle of all of this, in 1986, that an encounter took place which would eventually redirect her personal life entirely. At the peak of her EastEnders fame, in August 1986, Dobson released a single called Anyone Can Fall in Love, built on the EastEnders theme music and written by Simon May, and it reached number 4 in the UK singles chart and stayed in the top 75 for 11 weeks. The single was produced by Queen guitarist Brian May, and that recording process was how the two of them first met. May was married to his first wife at the time, Christine Mullen, a marriage that had run from 1976 and ended in 1988, and the connection made in 1986 developed over the years that followed. Dobson later inspired him to write the 1989 Queen hit I Want It All, and the two of them married on the 18th of November 2000. She became stepmother to his 3 children, Jimmy, born in 1978, Louisa in 1981, and Emily in 1987. On the question of not having biological children herself, Dobson has been straightforward about the reasoning. She did not have children because she was passionate about having her career, and she has stated that without apology or qualification. In May 1988, after 3 years in the role, Anita Dobson left EastEnders, and the announcement that she was going was reported on the BBC 6 o'clock news because that was the level the character had reached. The reasons she has given in interviews over the years are consistent with each other, and they build the same picture regardless of when she was speaking. She wanted to do other things, and her own phrasing on the subject is unambiguous. Walking away was a huge risk, but she always had a great desire to do so many things. Alongside that, ran a strong resistance to being reduced to a single role, and she has returned to this point multiple times, describing how keeping herself tested mattered to her precisely because she did not want to get pigeonholed. The third reason, and arguably the most revealing one, has nothing to do with her own ambitions and everything to do with the character she had created. After leaving, the BBC made numerous offers for her to return, and she turned every one of them down, and her explanation became one of the most repeated things she has ever said publicly. Why tarnish the gorgeous creation that was Angie Watts? That is not the response of someone who left out of boredom or frustration. That is someone who understood exactly what had been built, valued it enough to protect it, and trusted that leaving it intact was the right thing to do. Angie was eventually written out, departing in the summer of 1988 and later revealed to have moved from Spain to Miami, where she remarried in February 1991. The character was killed off-screen in 2002, dying of a drink-related illness, and brought home to be buried by her on-screen daughter, Sharon Watts, played by Letitia Dean. In 2010, Dobson said she was glad it had ended that way, because making the character's death permanent meant a return was no longer something that needed to be resisted. The risk she had described turned out not to pay off immediately, and the early years after EastEnders were harder than the size of her fame might have implied they would be. An ITV sitcom called Split Ends in 1989 ran for one series and did not continue. A Red Dwarf appearance came in 1993. Guest roles in Casualty began from 2000, the first of what eventually became 5 separate appearances in the show across the years. The career she was building looked from the outside like a slow and uneven process, but she kept taking on work that pushed her into new territory, and in 2003 she received an Olivier Award nomination for Best Actress for her performance in Frozen at the Royal National Theatre. That is the highest formal recognition available to a stage actor in Britain, and earning a nomination for it is not something that happens by accident or by coasting on a former television profile. That same year, she played Mama Morton in the West End production of Chicago, and in 2005, she took on Gertrude in Hamlet with the English Touring Theatre. The 2011 series of Strictly Come Dancing introduced her to a different kind of audience, partnered with Robin Windsor, and eliminated in week 9 after Windsor was injured. Her RSC debut came in 2012 in The Merry Wives of Windsor, and between 2016 and 2017, she played Madame Morrible in Wicked at the Apollo Victoria Theatre. In 2019, she played Yente in Trevor Nunn's West End revival of Fiddler on the Roof, and between 2023 and 2025, she appeared in Doctor Who as Mrs. Flood, a character later revealed to be the Rani. Taken together, that is a career defined by range, by a consistent willingness to take on demanding stage work alongside television, and by the absence of anything that looks like someone resting on what they achieved in 1986. Recognition arrived in various forms across those years. During the EastEnders period, she won the Pye Award for Outstanding Female Personality, and in 2007, she was made a companion of the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts. 3 separate Channel 4 polls placed her as the #1 television barmaid, the 5th most popular queen of soaps, and the 75th greatest television character of all time, and a 2004 poll on the greatest soap moments ever made put the scene of Den handing Angie the divorce papers at number 1. In 2025, an OBE arrived in the birthday honors, awarded for services to charitable fundraising and to philanthropy, and Sir Brian May's knighthood made her formally Anita Lady May OBE, a title she does not use publicly. For nearly 4 decades, the answer to every return offer had been no, and Angie Watts had been left exactly where Dobson wanted her, finished, complete, and untarnished. Shortly before Christmas 2024, the phone rang, and a call came about a potential appearance for EastEnders' 40th anniversary. She told only her husband, and both of them were sworn to silence while she thought it over. She said yes. On the 19th of February 2025, exactly 40 years to the day from the broadcast of the first episode of EastEnders, Dobson reprised the role in a one-off appearance. The storyline placed Sharon trapped on a staircase in the Queen Vic following an explosion caused by Race Colwell and Cindy Beale, and while stuck there, she hallucinated Angie, who appeared to tell her that she was doing brilliantly and that she was missed. Dobson wore the same outfit she had worn in her very first appearance in 1985, having kept it all the years in between, and she described the experience as a real gift. Her reasoning for accepting, after nearly 4 decades of refusals, was put plainly. She had to think about it and concluded it was really good closure for Angie Watts and for herself. Of stepping back onto the set, she said it was like walking back into a swimming pool of warm water with everybody welcoming and kind, and that she enjoyed every moment of it. The appearance was shortlisted for Scene of the Year at the 2025 British Soap Awards. Looking back now, what stands out most is how consistent Anita Dobson has remained whenever she has spoken about EastEnders. The names of the interviewers changed, the years passed, and the program itself evolved, yet her explanation barely shifted. She never described leaving as an act of rebellion, nor did she claim she regretted the decision. Instead, she kept returning to the same simple idea that every performer eventually reaches a point where staying feels safer than leaving, and she chose the harder option because she believed it was the right one. That decision surprised millions of viewers at the time because Angie Watts still felt like the beating heart of the Queen Vic, but from Dobson's perspective, the role had already given her everything she could have hoped for. What makes that choice even more unusual is what followed. Many actors spend years trying to recreate the one part that made them famous, while others eventually return because the character becomes impossible to escape. Anita Dobson did the opposite. Every invitation to come back was weighed against the same question she had asked herself from the beginning, whether returning would genuinely add something or simply risk weakening what audiences already remembered. For decades, her answer remained no, and that consistency helped preserve Angie Watts as one of the defining characters in British television history, rather than someone whose story slowly faded through repeated appearances. When she finally agreed to return, in 2025, it happened on her own terms, and for a reason that made sense to her. It was not about restarting an old storyline or chasing nostalgia. It was about giving both Angie and herself a moment of closure after 40 years. That is why the appearance resonated with so many viewers. It respected everything that had come before, instead of trying to replace it, and it allowed one of EastEnders' most iconic characters to take one final bow without undoing the legacy that had been carefully protected for decades. This is the full shape of what she chose, what it cost her, and what it gave her. A woman from Stepney who spent 13 years in repertory theatre before landing a role that 30.15 million people watched on a single Christmas afternoon, left that role at the height of its fame because she did not want to be defined by it, because she had more to offer, and because she understood that going back would only diminish something that deserved to remain whole. The decades that followed produced an Olivier nomination, an RSC debut, Wicked Doctor Who, and an OBE, and then, when the right moment finally arrived 40 years on, she went back once more, wore the original outfit, and gave Angie Watts the kind of ending the character had always deserved. The truth about why she left has never been hidden or complicated. She left because she valued what she had built too much to let it own her, because she had more she wanted to do, and because, as it turned out, she was right on both counts.